Kakadosh Boker Tov. We're continuing with Halachot of Bedikat Hametz. Before the night of the 14th at nighttime, which is Erev Pesach at nighttime, which this year will come out on Thursday night, what I have to do is we have to clean out the house, whether it's going to be the different parts of the house, Nikayon Yisudi, something actually very fundamental, a deep cleaning, in order that there shouldn't be any type of a suspicion of Chametz that is going to be in our possessions during the days of Pesach. And somebody that is very careful that there should not be nothing of Chametz whatsoever on Pesach, he is going to be certain that he shouldn't sin the entire year. That's what's brought down in the words of the Arizal HaKadosh. Now we also have to check the pockets of the clothing, and especially the pockets of the children's clothing, right? And also in their backpacks, right? In their different things, in order to make sure that there's not going to be any chametz there. And then you don't have to check it on the 14th at night, leoraner, to the light of a candle. Now we start already. This is going to be done by tzeta kochavim immediately, right? And nevertheless, b'diavad, if a person did check after shekiah before tzeta kochavim, they are going to be tzeta chovah, right? But he says, but it's better to check it again. Odzman ma b'leil yudal, it's still during the nighttime, not only during after the shekiah, but to continue. Now, if you checked it on the night of the 13th of Nisan, you don't have to check it again, right, on the night of the 14th of Nisan. It's already starting half an hour before the time of the checking of the chametz. You're not allowed to eat a seudah of bread or cakes more than a shiur of kabetzah. However, though, to eat bread until kabetzah is going to be permitted, and fruits and vegetables is going to be permitted even more than a kabetzah, or even, for example, rice or any other type of a food. And all the more so you're allowed to drink, whether it's going to be tea, coffee, and you're not allowed to start any melacha, any type of a job, also half an hour before the bedikah. If you started though beheter, which means that you started with a permission, that means you started earlier, for example, before the half an hour, whether it was that you started eating or you started doing a melacha, right? So he says, even though you do not have to stop, nevertheless, right, for sure that if you want to stop, it's better because tavo alav beracha. To do with learning Torah also, you're not allowed to learn Torah, right, once it becomes the time, right, or once it becomes the time of doing the Bedikat Hametz, but there's no isur, right, the half an hour before the Bedikah because of Bitul Torah. Now, if you started learning Beheter before the Zman of Bedikah, you do not have to stop. Now, everything that we spoke about not stopping was Beno Levin Atzmo, that is to do with you and yourself, meaning you're learning by yourself. But a shiur which is given in public every single night, you're allowed to do it also before the Bedikah, and even if it's going to take longer time, there's no problem because then we're going to suspect that they're not going to he says they're not going to actually learn the Torah afterwards or come back, so therefore they're allowed to do the regular shiur, and we're not going to suspect that they're going to forget once they leave, because again, right after the shiur that you just mentioned, by the way, we have to do Bedikat Hametz tonight, and then by mentioning that, hopefully they will come and they will do the Bedikah afterwards. What about sleeping? So it says if somebody was traveling and he gets to his house on the 14th at night and he's very tired and he suspects that if he's going to check it immediately, he won't have any kavanah whatsoever, he won't have his mind concentrated whatsoever on the bedikah, he's allowed to sleep a little bit, right, shenat arai, which means very short amount, right, and he should make sure that somebody's going to wake him up, but this is only going to be at the beginning of the night. But once it comes 2 or 3 hours from the beginning of the night, so therefore he says it doesn't help to start putting a shomer or start putting somebody to wake him up. You have to do the bedikah beforehand. If a person did not pray arvit before doing the bedikah of the chametz, so he says first he should pray arvit and then do bedikat chametz. And if there's somebody else, so right there that's there, so then he could tell them to remind him to pray arvit immediately after the bedikah. And then what's going to happen is that he's going to pray and then he'll do the bedikah immediately afterwards. Right before the bedikah, we have a minhag of putting pieces of bread around the house. According to the Alpiya Kabbalah, you have to put 10 pieces of bread. If you remember in the past, we said that it's very important that usually it's the children that go around hiding the pieces of bread. So we told them in order not to have any problems, we always tell the people to make sure of 2 different things. First of all, that they write down exactly where they're hiding the chametz, because it's happened in the past that the children, right, they hide it very well, right, and maybe the parents don't, I'm not going to say blind it up, it's the opposite way around, maybe we're not doing the check the way that we're supposed to. So all of a sudden, and we've gotten phone calls in the past, where all of a sudden the children have hidden the chametz so well, right, that they can't even find it. Now obviously the children didn't flush it down the toilet, they hid it, and the problem is, right, and then they forget where they hid the 10 pieces. So therefore it's always important that they go around with the children, right, whether it's a wife or whatever, to write down where exactly is, right, these 10 pieces, right, that's going to be number 1. And number 2 also, make sure that every single piece that you're putting out each one should be less than a kazait, which means that every single one should be less than a kazait, because even if you did forget or you don't know exactly or got lost, so therefore if it's going to be less than a kazait, it's much better. Also remember that a person should try to wrap it up, whether it's going to be in paper towel, newspaper, whatever it is that they're going to do, they should wrap it up to make sure that it's not going to make crumbs. Right? Sometimes people put it in foil. Foil is very, very good, but it's going to be bad later on for the burning. Because later on, the next day, when you're going to come to burn it and you put it in foil and you throw it inside, you're not going to burn the actual chametz. So therefore, it's important that even if you do put it in foil, make sure that afterwards, the next day, when you're going to do the srefat chametz, that you take it out of the foil and you're going to throw it inside the fire. So that's also going to be very, very, very important. Okay, so now he comes and he says that the nera kashel bedikas, so the bedikas should be with leor ner shava. It should be with a wax candle. Okay, and then he comes and he says neravuka, a torch is going to be prohibited for such a thing, because obviously you cannot put it in the cracks and crevices. So therefore, that's not going to be good. Now, if you have two candles which are put together, right, but the wicks are not touching each other, it's still considered ner echad, and it's going to be kasher. Obviously, to be careful. Now he comes and he says, to do with an electric flashlight. So he says, even though mitzvah min mivchad is to check with a wax candle, nevertheless, if it's difficult for them to get, so then he could check with an electric flashlight, and he could check. And he says nurach hashmir, or any other type of a flashlight, a small one, and it's not considered a torch. And therefore, he comes and he says you're allowed to do the bidikah with that as well. Now, you do not need to turn off the lights of the electricity when you're checking for bedikat chametz, and the beracha of the Chametz is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu b'chol ha'am asher kol tzivanu al biur Chametz. And if you said levaer Chametz, you're going to be to the chova b'diavad. And the reason why we don't make the beracha and bidikah is because the entire purpose of the bidikah is going to be for the biur. Lina, that will continue, because there's going to be much more halachot to do with the bidikah, and then we'll continue from bedikat Chametz onwards, b'ezrat Hashem.